Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Esri GeoDev webinar series. GeoDev webinars started about 3 years ago when we thought about ways we could keep the developer-related topics and discussions happening throughout the year. While hosting Dev Summit conferences a couple of times a year is always a great way to demonstrate all of the great work that takes place on the ArcGIS platform, we found that we wanted these conversations to happen more regularly. So the GeoDev webinar series was created to help us do just that. We do have our next Dev Summit coming up at the end of the year, and it will be virtual. We will have a lot of new topics, advanced features, and additional functionality to share with you over the next coming months. So please stay connected with us through our GeoDev webinar page on go.esri.com/geodev for future webinars, or our @EsriGeoDev social media accounts for future announcements of our developer community events. So now we would like to introduce you to today's webinar, a developer guide to ArcGIS Hub, and we hope you find it as exciting and as informative as we do. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You will see a screenshot similar to the one you see on the right-hand side of the slide. You should see something that looks like this on your own screen in the upper right corner. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default, but if you would prefer to join over the phone, just select Use Telephone in the audio pane and the information for how to dial in will be displayed. One of the best features of having a webinar is that you will have the opportunity to submit text questions to the presenters by typing your questions in the questions pane of the control panel. At any time throughout the webinar, feel free to submit questions. We will gather all of the questions and address as many as we possibly can at the end of today's webinar. Whatever questions we are not able to address, we will have in a follow-up blog post on GeoNet. You will receive more information about this in a follow-up email sent to you after the webinar. I would now like to introduce you to one of our presenters, Dave Bowman. Dave, let's get this webinar started, shall we?
Great, thanks, Amy. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a developer's guide to ArcGIS Hub. We're going to split this into two pieces. I'm Dave Bowman. I'm a senior software engineer on the ArcGIS Hub and ArcGIS Enterprise Sites team. And I'm going to be talking about the JavaScript side of things. And then I'll be handing it over to Manushi, who's also on our team, and she's going to be talking about the Python API and some of the cool analytics stuff that we're releasing soon. Okay, so with that, again, a quick breakdown of what we're going to go through. We're going to talk a little bit about ArcGIS Hub and Enterprise Sites, how the two are related, how they kind of build on each other, because that's important from the perspective of these developer tools that we have, because they kind of work with both. We're going to talk about the domain model, so what are the various parts of the Hub system that you can work with through these APIs, and then again, I'm going to go over the JavaScript one, and Manushi's going to handle the Python. So let's keep moving into here. ArcGIS Hub. We can think about ArcGIS Hub as really being a system that builds on top of the rest of the platform. So it's this cloud platform that we know, ArcGIS Online, but we've built an easy to configure layer on top of that that really helps organizations collaborate with their communities to establish and accomplish information-driven initiatives. So this is kind of like, how do we take the platform, automate a whole bunch of the parts of it, and then make the collaboration much more seamless? So that's kind of the top level of what the Hub is about. And below that, we can think of ArcGIS Enterprise Sites as some of the fundamental platform capabilities. So Enterprise Sites gives you the ability to create customized websites and web pages that features content out of your portal, uses your portal's security information model, and then really presents it to your non-GIS users. So if we look at this kind of as a stack with ArcGIS, the portal information system on the bottom, and then we have the functionality that's available at Enterprise Portal, so you can install this on-premise, et cetera, et cetera. You get sites and pages, and with those sites and pages, you can build stuff like an open data site, you can build a private data site, you can connect applications into those sites and pages, all that sort of thing. It's basically just the core functionality that you can use that's available in Enterprise. Stepping up one level to ArcGIS Online, what we call ArcGIS Hub Basic is available to all users in ArcGIS Online. That gets you sites and pages. Similarly, the idea, you can build open data sites, you can build private data sites, you can build sites that don't have a data index. It doesn't really matter, right? The sites and pages are the primitives. Then you can connect in other applications that you've created that are part of the platform. And the whole security model all is seamless across all this. But at the ArcGIS Online level, we connect in analytics. So you're able to see how many people are interacting with and downloading the various data sets or applications that you've posted in there. We also have a much more robust search index that deeply indexes the data sets and documents that you put into your sites and pages. So those are the two things you get as the step up to ArcGIS Online. And then when you move up to the full premium licensing, this is where we start talking about initiatives and the actual, like, there's a separate organization filled with a whole bunch of different community identities. So members of your community can have full-blown ArcGIS online identities and communicate. And so like a shared security model there, the ability to create events, create followers of things, feedback, and teams. So it's kind of this stacked information model that really gets summarized kind of in what we call the hub domain model. And this is a conceptual model that sits on top of the ArcGIS portal. So the main things that we're going to be talking about in terms of what you can work with from an API perspective will be sites and pages, as well as an initiative. Again, the light blue stuff is things available if you're a premium subscriber. Otherwise, gray is available in ArcGIS Enterprise and just ArcGIS Online. So sites, pages, and initiatives, those are backed by items in the portal information system. The core team, content team, follower teams, etc. These are they're more semantically enabled, but they're basically groups in the portal information system. They're tightly tied into these other objects, and so that's kind of why we call them something different, but that's really what they boil down to. And we have events. Events are exactly what they sound like, kind of an Eventbrite type thing. Those are stored in a feature service. And so they're kind of, again, you're managing stuff that's stored in the feature service, but it's connected into the rest of it. So we're going to give you APIs to kind of work with that as a piece of this larger system. So with that, let's talk about the core package or core library called Hub.js. So as I said, right, this is your JavaScript API for creating and maintaining, managing sites, pages, teams, events, initiatives, etc. And so really what we've been doing over the last year is migrating the logic out of the Hub user interface, which is built in Ember.js. We're hoisting all that logic out, and we're pulling that into a separate standalone library. We're open sourcing this. It's been open source since the beginning. And the main point here is just to allow our customers and our developers to work with this stuff and deeply customize the Hub. So if there are workflows that we can't facilitate directly via UI, then either via these JavaScript libraries or via Python, you can probably automate some aspect of it. This stuff is written in TypeScript. That's pretty much standard across Esri these days. You install it via NPM. And when you do the NPM install of these packages, you get three actual things you can work with. There's a common JS build, which is for working in Node. There's a UMD build. This is if you want to just write vanilla JavaScript or you're using a require-based system. If you're building on top of the ArcGIS API for JavaScript, you'd want to use the UMD build. And then if you're using like React or Vue or Ember or whatever, Angular, you'll probably use the ESM modules. And so that's if you already have a build system that's going to use Babel and then like Webpack and rollup sort of things, then the ESM modules are what you'd use. Typically, you don't really have to worry about this. We just want to highlight, if you're working in Node, you're going to get native Node bindings. If you're working with ES6 modules, you're going to use the ESMs. In terms of how this thing is set up, it's a little bit different from a lot of other APIs, I think, kind of in the Esri ecosystem. This is not a class-based model. This is all based around a set of functions that are going to work with data. The data is going to come from the backing API. So if you're working with a site, you're actually working with the JSON that is stored in the site item. And then we have functions that are going to transform that in various different ways, go send it back to the server, so on and so forth. Notable, this is the code that's used in Hub, right? This is our production code base. You know, anything we do with managing, manipulating a site goes through this: page, initiative, teams, events. It's all, this is the stuff. Consequently, I'm going to shift over here in a second, actually looking at the documentation for this. It's currently a very low-level API. So you'll see functions like get team types available in product, etc. And this makes complete sense from the perspective of our UI code, but this may not be the most useful function directly for you as a developer to consume. But we're going to be working on that over time. So with that, let's move over to looking at the Jsa API documentation. This is at, we'll have this URL on the last slide, but it's github.io/hubjs. And this is what it looks like. So as I said, if we look at the API reference, I wanted to mention a few things in here. Every time we do a release of this, which is frequent, like we just did the 6.4 release yesterday afternoon, there'll probably be another one doing .1, .2 today, tomorrow sort of thing. So this is under very heavy development. But it's all this documentation under API reference. This is all auto-generated directly out of the source code. So if we go look at, we'll pick add domain. So this content right here is coming out of a comment in the source code. And then I wanted to highlight this, again, because it's open source, we can directly link to the actual function. So we can say, hey, this is exactly how the documentation was generated right here. So that's kind of nice, a little bit different in terms of APIs from Esri. You can go see the code, and if there's something wrong with the code, pull requests are accepted. I don't know how many open pull requests we have right now. There's 4. So that's how that stuff works. I really wanted to kind of spend the rest of the time that I've got with you here just kind of looking at the guides, right? Because this, as we said, even just if we looked inside sites, there's a lot of different functions in here. We could do a full week course on how to work with all this stuff. So instead, what we're going to focus on is what do we have in terms of guides for getting started. So we have a getting started using a CDN. This is basically, if you want to just mess around with things, prototype some stuff, use it in a JS bin or a JS fiddle, all you got to do is drop in a bunch of script tags. In this case, you got to bring in Arcgis REST.js because we depend on that. And then you can bring in, common and sites. And then this one is just going to, the example is looking up a site by a domain. But you could take this and paste it into a JS bin or a JS fiddle, and it would just work. Of note, though, you don't necessarily want to run your production website off of unpackaged.com. This is a super handy resource for everybody on the internet, but it is not really a production stable, high performance CDN. So you should definitely, great for prototyping, maybe don't use it in production. We have an example how to do this with Node. It's very similar to using Arcgis REST.js. You need some sort of fetch and form data polyfill, but after that, then you just require in the modules that you want to use. And this is just straight up Node. It's going to use the common JS code by default. If you're using ES6, well, that's exactly the way you would use any other ES6 module. We have a section on authentication. As I said, we build on top of Arcgis REST.js, which, if you're not aware, this is another TypeScript-based library. It's basically low-level wrappers over the Arcgis REST API. So you should definitely check this out if you haven't. We build on top of that. And so we're basically, this article talks about how we extend the request options to pass in more information that's required so that the hub functions can know about whether your organization is a premium org or a basic org. And if you have a community organization that's connected to your current organization, so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff that we need from your organization stuff. So this article talks about that, gives you some source code to kind of get up and running. We, for sites and pages, right, that's that package that I showed before with the 115 different functions in it. What we tried to do in here was start showing a bunch of things that might be common use cases. So if you went in and created a site on arcgis.com, created a site, then you want to go and find that item for whatever need, you can use the lookup domain function, put in the URL of your site, and it will go and get you this hash called the domain info, and that's going to be able to tell you the org ID that owns it, and the item ID, and a number of other things. When was it last updated, et cetera, et cetera. So this can be pretty handy. The important thing is you can use the same function whether you're working against ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. The two systems work very, very differently. We have a backend in ArcGIS Online that can serve a website at a fully qualified domain. In ArcGIS Enterprise, we don't have a backend hub-specific web server, so the domain is actually a hash in the URL. But these functions will work exactly the same way, regardless of what the backend is. Here's another example. You want to update a site's domain. How do you go and do that? Maybe you want to change from beta to data. You said, okay, this is now our official site. That's sort of a thing, workflow. This is another example about how to do it. It's very kind of standard code. Once you figure out the function call you want to make and you send in the right information, it's pretty direct. The last one we have in here, and this one's important, it's a good example because it kind of shows what we hide behind the scenes in terms of what the Hub.js API can do. So suppose you want to remove a site, right? Your one option is you can go into ArcGIS Online and just delete the site. We don't recommend you do that because a site is tightly tied to a whole bunch of other stuff. It has, as we just went through here, right, it's got entries in our domain system. ArcGIS Online doesn't know about the domain system. It doesn't know about the teams, the groups that are connected to it as teams. It doesn't know about the initiative item that might have gotten created if you're a Hub Premium user. And so when we call this simple function remove site, assuming you have the permissions to do this as your identity, it's going to unprotect and delete the related initiative item if you're in Hub Premium. It locates and removes all the related team groups. It's going to kill all the domain entries in the Hub domain system. It'll locate any pages connected to them and remove the site references, because sites and pages can be cross-linked, like many pages can belong to many sites and vice versa. It will also unprotect the site item and then finally clean it up for you. So this single call here is going to go through and do all of these things, and it will make sure that it does it in the right order and in a unified way, such that if the user who's attempting to do this doesn't have the ability to do it, then it won't do anything. So that's kind of a good example of the value of what this thing brings. This guide about Hub teams, at this point, this is really just kind of telling you, hey, what is a content team? What's a collaboration team? How are these things created? So on and so forth. The complex thing about a team is that it's backed by a group, and its IDs are stored inside items, because there isn't the ability to create a relationship between an item and a group, other than kind of an ownership or compositional, just kind of thing like that. So we actually have to hold the IDs in things. Now, what gets tricky is that within the portal information system, users have privileges, and those privileges can revoke certain capabilities that are required to create these teams. So a lot of the stuff that we have, even though any user with the rights to create an item in ArcGIS Online can go and create a website, they may or may not be able to create the teams. So a lot of the functions that are inside the Teams API are about how do we create the team if the user has the right privileges. If they don't, how do we back out of that part but still allow everything else to happen? At this point, I mean, this just kind of sums it up. At this point, most of what's in the Teams API is pretty low-level functions that really support our UI today. So we're going to be exposing a much more coarse-grained API for this in the future. Something that you can be like, hey, I can just call one function and it will repair the teams for a site or an initiative, that sort of thing. Then really quickly, I wanted to talk about this module here called Hub Utilities, or the package name is Hub Common. Now, we on our team kind of think about this as the Lodash for Hub, or even for the platform. So we could bring in Lodash, but we're trying to be really cognizant about package sizes and stuff like that. And it turns out that if you want to just pull in a few functions out of Lodash, you end up actually getting almost all of Lodash just because of the way it's really a tightly linked library. So we built a bunch of functions to do the things that we need that are really high value. When you're working with objects that are stored in ArcGIS Online, we tend to work with deep object graphs, right? So if you imagine working with a web map JSON, right, that's a deeply nested structure, and it may or may not have properties at different places depending on its configuration. So one of the first things we wanted to do was avoid having to write code that does this, basically property path checking. If the item.properties and item.properties.parent ID, item.properties parent ID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These things can get pretty long if you're doing a really deep path. So, again, taking this function effectively from Ember and Lodash, and a lot of frameworks have the same thing, we are adding getProp and getProp with default. And what's cool about that is you take getProp, you give it an object, and then you give it the path as a string. And if any part of that path is undefined, then this, instead of blowing up, this thing is just going to return null. So that's a really handy thing. It saves you a whole bunch of work, and it's easier to read than a long-winded thing like that. The get property with default is super useful when you want to be able to chain stuff directly. So if we had item.properties.children, which should be an array if it's defined, and then we wanted to run a map operation in that array, we can use get property with default. And if it's undefined, then we would get a empty array, which of course can still run a map. It's just the way you get out of it is an empty array. So it's a way to write really terse code that you know won't fail, even if some part of that path is not defined. If anybody's working with React or in the React community, you've probably heard about immutable JS and the idea that you want to avoid mutating the data objects through your application. For a variety of reasons. One, size, two, complexity, and then just how objects that are wrapped inside immutable wrappers don't necessarily play nice with libraries that don't know about that. We couldn't bring that in, but we still operate on the same general philosophy within Hub.js. So we have a handy clone object. Most of our functions, when you pass an object into them, the first thing they're going to do before they make any changes to that object is make a clone of it. So this is a super handy thing. We use it all over the place. And then we have a bunch of array functions. Again, if you've worked with Lodash, these are fairly familiar. Removing an element from an array by its identity, removing it by a deeply nested property path, extracting a property value out of an array, finding elements based on deep property values. So as you can see, like this deal about we work with the deep property paths, it's everywhere in what we do. So that's why we've built these utilities to help out. The last thing, and this is super powerful because this stuff is powering more and more of the Hub platform, and it's also what's going to be powering the solution stuff. And this is the idea about taking a template that is a JSON object and effectively interpolating another JSON object over it. This is some really cool stuff. There's actually a library called AdLib that we wrote and we brought in. That thing's got a lot more documentation, but this is a super powerful thing. So with that, I wanted to also quickly talk about what we're doing at the UI tier. So Hub Components. This is a project that's ongoing right now, and we're just in the early phases. But basically, once again, we're taking stuff out of our Ember environment and we're converting them into web components that are going to allow us and our customers to embed these things into websites and custom applications. We're building on a package called Calcite Components, which is built by Esri, and this is effectively the fundamental building blocks of all of Esri's next generation UIs. So you'll finally be in a world where everything all across the entire Esri ecosystem is this really consistent look and feel, which is fantastic, right? It doesn't matter whether it's built in React or it's built in Dojo or Angular, will be all consistent because the baseline is these Calcite components. And so, you can use this in React or any other framework. Certain of these components you'll be able to just drop directly onto an HTML page or into like a Drupal system. What's important here is this stuff has some limits when you start talking about down-level browsers. In IE11 and Edge, you can usually get these things to load with some polyfills, but in terms of having them be stylable, that gets a little more limited. The supported components, so our intent is to actually have a whole set of supported components. They're going to be at this URL. Currently, this is still a closed source library as we're moving stuff over. But I did want to show you this one just to kind of, this is our hub components. So this is the currently unsupported, but very many components in here. And we can open up what's called Storybook. And then look at one of these. So this is a component. Let's do a search. So search for water. I should have picked a better search here. There's the gallery again. Resource type, blog posts, whatever. So this entire component right here, you can drop into a page with that much content right there. A script tag in this component. So this is really what we're aiming at, right? How can we facilitate people taking various aspects of the hub and the site and the page and all of those different things and being able to remix them while still building on top of, the fundamental platform, right? Underneath this is a portal and a portal identity and items and feature services. So that's really what's going on there in terms of those UIs. So this is an example from the CalSite thing. Yay, we're all going to get consistent modals. This is just a hub card. You pass it an ID, it loads itself from the item. This is a little more comprehensive one. This is loading a notebook into your page and giving you the ability to clone it. So really quickly, because I know Manushi's got a lot of good stuff to talk about, what's the future on the Hub.js side of the house? We should be able to complete the migration of all of our business logic out of the Ember application into Hub.js. That's going to be sometime next year because there's a lot of code in there and we just need to move it all over. Once we get that all over, we'll actually have a more focused coarse-grained API available in JavaScript. So as we take things that are kind of deeper and deeper in Ember and start moving bigger and bigger chunks over, that will actually result in a coarser-grained API available. We're going to be building a HTTP API. So we're going to have a server-side component. And the point around this, right, is we're going to take all this JavaScript that we have and run it in a node server. And so that'll be our HTTP API, and it allows us to move these complex, long-running processing into a server environment. So when you create a site, right, which hopefully many of you have played with, right, it takes a few minutes because it's creating a whole bunch of items and groups, and it's moving stuff around all over the place on the server side. If you kill your browser halfway through that, it's just going to leave kind of a mess. And so moving that over to a stable backend where the node server is not going to shut down halfway through, that'll be a huge benefit. It will also allow the Hub Pi system to basically use the Hub.js logic by making HTTP calls. So that's kind of the goal there is so that what Manushi's going to show you, unfortunately, currently is another copy of roughly the same logic, but done in Python. And then really quickly, we're considering building like a hub class that would be really strictly around Node, but it would be really focused on doing automation type things. The same sort of approach that you would use with Python. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Manushi.
Thank you, Dave. And with that, we move to the Python land, or to look at HubPy, that's Arcgis Hub's Python library. HubPy can be thought of as the Python interface to Arcgis Hub. Or simply put, it's a Python package or Python library that allows us to perform most of the UI functionalities and automate them using simple Python scripts. The capabilities supported are for initiatives, events, sites, and pages. HubPy is built over the Arcgis API for Python. What that means is, in order to successfully install and run HubPy, you need to have the Arcgis API for Python pre-installed on your machine. For those of us not familiar, the Arcgis API for Python is a platform-wide Python API that allows us to automate our WebGIS workflows, as well as interact with several item types and perform data analysis as well. And for those of us who are familiar with the Arcgis API for Python, we'll notice that the design as well as the usage of HubPy is similar to that of the Arcgis API for Python in the interest of uniformity. HubPy has support for Hub Premium, that is the initiatives, events, sites and pages in your premium organizations, as well as sites and pages in Hub Basic and enterprise sites organizations for versions 10.8 and above. Dave mentioned that Hub.js has a functional design. HubPy, on the other hand, has an object-oriented design similar to that of the Arcgis API for Python. Let's now take a look at HubPy in some detail. So this particular GitHub repository is the home or location of HubPy or Arcgis Hub's Python library. Installing this library is as easy as launching command prompt or terminal from your machine and executing this one simple command right here. Once it has installed, you can test if it has successfully installed on your machine by launching a Jupyter Notebook instance and running this particular command to import the Hub module from the Arcgis Hub package. Arcgis Hub is the name of this package, so we try importing either the Hub or Sites modules from this package. A thing I'd like to make a note of here is similar to the Arcgis API for Python, the intended environment to use our library is Jupyter Notebooks. While you most certainly can use it on standalone scripts or even web frameworks like Django for that matter, it is built for a seamless experience in Jupyter Notebooks. Upgrading this package again is as easy as executing the same installation command. What this does is it fetches the new updated code base and overrides the Arcgis Hub egg file on your machine with the new code base. And then to verify, you can verify the version of the new installed Arcgis Hub package to verify if the version has been upgraded. Let's now take a look at the documentation for this library. So as I mentioned previously, the design of HubPy is object-oriented. What that means is you first create an instance of your hub based on your login credentials that you use to sign into your hub, and having done that, you can then interact with a collection of initiatives or events if you are a Hub Premium user, as well as individual initiative and event instances, as well as sites and pages if you are a Hub Basic or Enterprise Sites user. One thing I'd like to draw attention to is for each of these classes, we see it returns a bunch of properties as well as it has a few methods that it supports. To learn more about the properties that it returns as well as the methods and their parameters that are needed, I encourage you to take a look at the API reference for our HubPy and SitesPy modules. Within this API reference, you'll find detailed documentation for each of the classes as well as the properties it returns and the methods it supports, along with a few usage examples to know how to successfully use these methods. And for those of us who use Arcgis notebooks, we know Arcgis notebooks comes pre-installed with a few packages. However, it does not come with the Arcgis Hub package. And installing it in your Arcgis notebook instance is as easy as running the same installation command in a particular notebook cell. What this does is it installs the Arcgis Hub package successfully in your notebook instance for you to use it further to work with your hub items and hub objects. There are several examples, several use cases and applications that HubPy supports. For your initiatives, events, sites and pages, you can not only fetch an instance of a single one based on its unique ID or item ID, you can search across the entire collection accessible to you, as well as filter based on a few words of the title, or for that matter even the name of the owner or tags of the item. You can add or create a new one, update an existing one, as well as delete an existing one. Another interesting use case it supports is site layout editing. That is, you can add, edit, delete rows and cards off of your site and programmatically enhance the look and feel of your sites. We've all cloned sites and initiatives off of the UI and know how easy and straightforward it is. But did you know using HubPy, cloning initiatives and sites from one organization to another is not only possible, but it's also very straightforward? You can not only clone initiatives and sites from one organization to another, irrespective of whether if it's an Arcgis Online Basic or Premium organization. It will intelligently know whether to return a site item or a site and initiative item for you. You can also clone sites from an Arcgis Online, that's Hub Basic or Premium organization, to an Arcgis Enterprise portal deployment and have a site with the same layout. You can similarly also clone sites from an Arcgis Enterprise portal to Hub Basic or Hub Premium. Let's take a look at a bunch of these examples. So as we see in this directory here, we have a bunch of use cases and user guides prepared for you. I encourage you to take a look at these to know about the several examples and several use cases that HubPy supports. Adding, updating, deleting initiatives, sites, events, and pages is all identical based on usage. Let's take a look at adding, updating, deleting initiatives. So as I previously mentioned, you start off by first creating a hub object. So since HubPy is the Python interface to Arcgis Hub, think about how you interact with Hub with the UI. Once you sign in, you then have access to your initiatives, sites, events within your organization. Similarly, once you sign in and you create a Hub instance, you then have access to your initiatives within your organization. But to add a new initiative, it's as easy as providing a title to the add method of the initiatives property of your Hub object. And there, as we see, we've successfully created a new initiative with that title. Now, as we see in this particular example, the snippet of this particular initiative that's preset while creating the initiative is Python initiative new custom initiative. What if I want to change this initiative snippet to suit what I want? So changing a snippet is as easy as adding that particular string to the snippet property of your initiative object. And there, as we see, it has successfully updated the snippet of our initiative. Now, as we see, this particular initiative object does not have any tags preset. How about adding tags? Adding tags is as easy as calling the update method on the initiative object and passing in the tags for that particular initiative. And as we see, it has successfully added tags to our particular initiative. There, the particular tags that we added have successfully been assigned to the initiative object. Deleting the initiative is as easy, as intuitive as calling the delete method on the initiative object, and we see it has successfully deleted the initiative. So working with initiatives, events, sites, and pages is extremely straightforward. Let's now take a look at an example for cloning an initiative in the same organization. So basically, cloning an initiative is as easy as A, fetching the initiative, and B, cloning it. Let's take a look at how it's done. So to start off, we first log into our hub and create a myHub object to work with. Having done that, we first fetch the initiative we'd like to clone by passing in the unique item ID for that initiative to the get method of the initiatives property of the hub. Having done that, we see that it has successfully fetched our particular initiative of interest, that's Python initiative new. We now clone this initiative within the same organization by passing the initiative object and a title. The title is optional. You may not provide a title while cloning the initiative, but you pass in the initiative object to the clone method of the initiatives property of your hub. And there, it has successfully cloned that initiative for us. Let's now take a look at an example to clone an initiative in another organization. I'd also like to make a note that while we're going through an example for cloning an initiative in another organization, this exact same flow even works for cloning a site in another organization. So as we know, we start off by signing into a particular hub. Having done that, we then fetch the particular initiative by passing the initiative item ID to the get method of the initiatives property of our hub object. Here we've successfully fetched our Python initiative new initiative that we'd like to clone. Now I sign into another hub that I'd like to clone this initiative into. So here I create a new hub object, that's hub premium, with the login credentials for that particular hub. Having done that, I now clone the initiative by calling the clone method on the initiatives property of the target organization. And what I pass to this method now is not only the particular initiative object that I'd like to clone, but also a reference to the origin hub for where this particular initiative object actually exists in. So since it exists in the my hub object in the my hub organization, I add a particular reference to it, and there it has successfully cloned the particular initiative. And as I previously mentioned, providing a title to the initiative is optional. If you do not provide a title, we create a new unique title for you. But here, we've seen that it has successfully cloned this particular initiative in the other target organization. Now, how about cloning this initiative in a Hub Basic organization? So here, I first sign into the Hub Basic organization by providing the necessary login credentials. Having done that, I follow the exact same code snippet, that is target organization dot initiatives dot clone, and I pass in the particular initiative that I'd like to clone along with a reference to the origin hub. And there, as we see, it has successfully created a hub site application as opposed to an initiative, since we're cloning into a basic organization and you get a site alone in a basic organization. And here, it has successfully cloned the initiative for us, and it has intelligently identified based on the target organization whether you get an initiative along with the site or just the site. So here, cloning initiatives across Arcgis online organizations is extremely straightforward. Let's now also see how to clone an initiative from Hub, that is in Hub Basic, that's an Arcgis online organization, to an enterprise sites portal deployment. So we know the steps by now. That is, you first sign in to your particular hub organization by providing the user credentials. Having done that, you then fetch the particular site you're interested in by providing the unique item ID for that site. So it's hubbasic.sites this time .get, and you pass in the unique item ID. Here we fetch the particular site, that's new site Manushi, that we'd like to clone into enterprise. And here what we do is we sign into our enterprise hub by creating a eHub object, and we sign in by providing the user credentials. I know signing into Hub when you have an enterprise deployment may seem like a misnomer here, but please stick with me. This will help you just as easily clone sites to and from your enterprise organization. So once you sign into your Hub and create a Hub object for your enterprise login credentials, you then similarly can clone your site to enterprise by target organization .sites.clone, and here you pass in the particular site you'd like to clone, and there it has successfully cloned the site for us within enterprise. Now how about the reverse process where I clone a particular site from Arcgis enterprise to hub? Same process holds. That is, I first fetch the particular site by passing the item ID to the get method of the site's property of the enterprise hub object. Having done that and fetch the particular site of interest, I now clone it by target organization.sites.clone by passing in the particular enterprise site of choice. And there, it has not only cloned this, but it has successfully created a unique copy for us in Hub Basic. So there, we've seen how easy and straightforward it is to fetch and clone initiative and site objects across the platform. Let's now take a look at a site layout editing example. We know how easy and straightforward Hub has made working with sites for us. Creating and editing and building sites on the fly has never been this easy before. But what if you want to make a particular change, like maybe change the background color of a card or a section across a bunch of your sites, or for that matter, maybe add like a PSA announcement card across all your sites, all your pages. Adding that one particular change manually again and again to all the sites and pages could seem a little cumbersome, but using HubPy, we'll see how easy and straightforward it is. So as we know, we start off by first signing into our hub and creating a MyHub object to work with. Having done that, in this case, I am creating a new initiative and site to edit the layout of. If not, and you know the particular site you'd like to work with, you can jump to the step where you fetch your particular site by passing in the site ID. Once we have our site, we now work with the layout of the site by using the layout property of the site object. One thing I'd like for us to take a look at before we get down to the Python scripts is how the site layout has been designed. So a site has sections. The sections are marked by these orange rectangles as we see here, and each section has a row within it and each row has a card. So the sections as we saw are orange rectangles, the rows are green rectangles, and each section could have multiple rows and each row could have multiple cards marked by these lilac rectangles. So what we see here is basically a section having one or many rows and a row having one or many cards. So in Python speak, basically that translates to a series of nested lists, and intuitively accessing these elements is also as easy as layout.sections, where you pass in the particular index of the section you'd like to access, and a section then has rows, so you pass in the particular index of the row you'd like to access, and since a row has cards, you can then pass in the particular card index, and there, as we see, we've fetched a particular card successfully. How about editing the background color of a section? So as we see, this particular section of that site has a blue background color. We can fetch the particular color for it by referencing the second section based on its index and the style background color property. As we see, the color is set to this particular blue, the hex code for this blue. Now, changing the color is as easy as setting the new color of choice to the particular color variable, and then we print it to verify if it has then set that particular value correctly, and we see that it has set it to the particular value of our choice. Now that we've actually replaced the value to the value of our choice, writing these changes or publishing these changes is as easy as calling the update layout method on the site object and then passing in this particular layout, this updated layout object. And having done that, what we see is the particular background color has successfully been updated to maroon. As easy as that. Now how about we add a new card? So as we saw, a section can have one or many rows and a row can have one or many cards. In this case, we are working with the second section and the first row within it. So as we see, this particular row just has one card right here. Adding a new card is as easy as first adding the particular dictionary value for that new card. Once we've done that, then we come down to some basics of Python. Adding a new element to a particular list is as easy as calling the append method on that list and passing in the new element. The same logic applies here. You append the cards list by adding the dictionary for that new card, and there, when we print it, we notice that now this particular list has two cards as opposed to the one that it previously had. Now that we've observed that the changes have been updated to the layout variable right here, we update and publish these changes by calling the update layout method on the site object and passing in this new layout. And there, It has added this new card adjacent to the one that was previously there. How about deleting sections? So as we see, the last section of the site has a contact or call to action section. Back to the basics of Python. Removing a particular element from a list is as easy as calling the pop method and passing in the index of that element. Since this is the last element, the last section we'd like to remove from the sections list, we pass in -1, and having observed that it has purged that particular section out, we now call the update layout method on the site object and pass in that particular layout, the updated layout without that section. And there, we see it has successfully removed that particular section for us. So now, we see how easy, how intuitive it is to work with site layout editing in Python using Hub's Python library. It basically is as easy, as straightforward as list manipulation in Python.
So we've seen all these examples, and there are a lot more there. I'd love for you to check them out and let us know of your thoughts on them. So we've seen how Arcgis Hub serves JavaScript developers, Python developers for automating workflows, but we also have a new offering for data scientists, data analysts, and GIS analysts. We are working on a new Civic Analytics with Arcgis Hub series. It's a series of notebooks and accompanying blog posts, which are released every week. What we do is we cover a bunch of different analysis techniques, and we have a blog post that goes over the techniques in detail, explaining them, explaining what they entail, how we collected data, or how we fetch data and performed analysis on them. Looks like it's taking a while to load. Let's try another one. But we've gone over details of how the analysis has been done, where we fetched our data from, and we also link out to the particular notebook. So as we see, this particular analysis has done text analysis on surveys conducted in a city for street safety in this case. We've also linked out to the ArcGIS notebook where this analysis has been done, so that you can easily adopt this notebook and test it out for surveys or other data sets specific to your particular local region. And to access this particular notebook, all you do is download it and add it to your particular ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise portal and work with these. The idea here is basically to create a data-informed community of citizens who want to come together, exchange ideas, and learn more about using civic data with a few GIS data analysis skills to drive change. So far, the offerings in this series include like an introduction to space and time analysis. We've done 2 notebooks on proximity-based spatial analysis, even statistical methods to identify relations and patterns in data. We've also done the text analysis one that I just showed you the blog post for. And we've also touched upon a simple machine learning technique in the last one. I invite you to check this out and get back to us with feedback and your thoughts and recommendations for this series. So where does the future of HubPy take us? We plan to add support for templates, that's initiative templates, as well as solution templates. So the idea is basically you can adopt an initiative template and create your own initiative by activating the initiative templates. And similarly for solution templates, create a copy of a solution template within a particular initiative. We also plan to add support for teams. So far, teams are implemented under the hood as groups, as Dave mentioned, for your sites and initiatives. But we plan to add support for supporting teams moving forward. Also, how to create and configure feedbacks and surveys, as well as effective management of community member and community member profiles. So as we see, future for Hub.js and HubPy is pretty bright. I'd like to leave you with these bunch of resources. So links to Hub.js, Hub components, CalSite components, and Arcgis ResJS that Dave walked us through, as well as links to the Python library where we have HubPy. Also link to the documentation, as that is the API reference for the HubPy and SitesPy module. Also the examples that I walked through, as well as a link to the Civic Analytics notebook series. Thank you for sharing your time with us today, and we look forward to connecting with you on GitHub as well as GeoNet. Thank you.
Thank you, Manushi. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. We've received quite a few, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. But whatever we do not get to today, we will address in a GeoNet blog post after this webinar. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. Our first question is, can you remind us of where the GitHub repo is for the hub components you showed?
Yeah, sure. This is Dave. So the second one in here is hub-components. That one is still currently closed. We're going to open it very shortly. If you put -experiments on the end of that, that should take you to the experiments one. We can also put a link. I just got informed about the experiments one this morning, so it didn't make it into the slide. But we'll put that into the stuff we post on GeoNet.
Okay, great. Thanks. The content is super interesting, but content is focused on an advanced level. Maybe you all can present a follow-up webinar like this, but at a lower level so we get a better understanding of this amazing product and expand on the fundamentals. Would that be possible?
It would be possible. I mean, this is the sort of thing like the Dev Summit, the one that's typically in California that got canceled this year or was done remotely. We do have a bunch of sessions that go over the kind of lower level stuff. So ArcGIS, REST.js, there are videos of that that you can watch that are, I believe, on YouTube from this year's Dev Summit. And then it'll be this one, but again, you know, like in an hour trying to cover the entire internal API of Hub is very, very difficult. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. And over time, this API will become more what we call coarse-grained, which makes it a lot easier, a lot more accessible for people to use and be able to see, oh, here's like the 6 functions for working with a site. But the evolutionary process of how we're building this by taking functional code out of our Ember application, moving it into TypeScript. But this is an application that we literally ship to production on Tuesday mornings. Like we don't have months of time to go move everything around. So we have to make sure it all works. It's a very incremental and slow process. So over time, we'll get to the point where there are coarser grained API endpoints, much more like what Manushi was showing.
And the examples in HubPy have all of the basic as well as advanced examples, but if there's a specific request for an example, I'm happy to go and add it back there.
Perfect, thank you. How would login authentication work with an organization's Active Directory?
So in order for your ArcGIS Enterprise or your ArcGIS Online to use Active Directory identities, you have to go, that's a configuration that's done at that level. So you set up your enterprise instance or your ArcGIS Online to use federated authentication to your ArcGIS or to your Active Directory or LDAP. I can't really go into more details than that because it's not at all my area of expertise. The way the hub works is however you need to authenticate against your portal, at the end of that process, the Python API or the JavaScript API ends up with a token, and then the rest of the requests are just sent with the token. So hopefully that answers your question, but it's below the hub level in terms of the Esri stack where you set up Active Directory authentication.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. Can Hub host my Jupyter notebooks and when we add our notebooks to Portal, can people view the notebook after I upload it?
Yes. So in your particular ArcGIS Online organization that's associated with your hub, you can create new notebooks. You can even add new notebooks the way you add or create new items. And based on the sharing settings of that notebook, you can share it with anyone and everyone. Yeah. And you can, I have a few resources if you look at the Civic Analytics series that shows you how to pull in data within your hub and work with it within the notebook.
Okay, and very quickly for our last question, do I need to install ArcGIS 10.8 to get ArcGIS Hub?
So ArcGIS Hub, the product, is a thing that exists in ArcGIS Online. So you don't really install anything. There's two levels there. If you just have a normal online account, you get Hub Basic. If your organization has purchased a premium licensing, you get the premium version. In terms of something that you can install locally, that would be the capabilities that are within ArcGIS Enterprise. And that the original first version we shipped in was 10.6.1 as a capability that your administrator could turn on. And then I think at 10.7, sites and pages were just available to all your users. So at 10.7 and up, you get sites and pages in Enterprise, and Hub Basic is available to everybody in online. And you would know if you're a premium org that you've got ArcGIS Hub Premium.
All right.
And to that particular point, the 10.8 applies only if you want to automate your sites and work with sites using Hub Pi, because Hub Pi supports only enterprise sites version 10.8 and above.
Ah, there we go. That's where the question came from. Thanks, Manushi.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thank you, Manushi and Dave. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, Developer Guide to ArcGIS Hub. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me using my email address in your follow-up email. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on this presentation, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. We will be providing a recording of this presentation, which will be available within 7 to 10 business days on the go.esri.com/geodev page. On behalf of Esri and our presenters, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.